Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Bubble winners and losers, okay? By the way, we just had a bubble result go final. We'll get to in a minute. First bubble winner. Listen, well, let's just start with the team that we just wrapped on. I don't believe that the Arkansas Razorbacks were on the bubble coming into Wednesday. Listen, I certainly think had they lost the game to South Carolina, you're sweating a little bit going into Selection Sunday. Are you going to Dayton? What's going to happen with the bid stealing scenario? Could somebody weird win the Mountain West? Could somebody knock off Duke and win the ACC? Listen, I believe they were in the field. 5 quad one wins coming into the weekend. Then, oh, by the way, they pick up a 6th quad one win because Georgia became a quad one win at the time. We'll see if that changes as the results come in on Wednesday. But the resume is just too good. And now you beat South Carolina. You avoid the second loss to the last place team in the league. It would have been a quad 2 loss here on a neutral court. So Arkansas is in. At this point, they're playing for seeding. They play Ole Miss on Thursday. By the time many of you see this, that game may already be underway or go final. I actually do like Arkansas to win that game, but I just bring it up because they're in. They're playing for seeding. By the way, if they beat Ole Miss, they would have a game against Auburn, so that would be very interesting. Kind of an interesting setup there because, that'd be a third game in 3 days. We don't know the status of Big Z, but I just bring it up because Arkansas, in my opinion, completely off the bubble. Listen, I respect all these teams, and I know stuff can happen. I just don't see the scenario that they're out. Let's keep it going on bubble winners. Let's stay in the SEC. Can't put what did Coach Cal say the other day? He said, everybody put us in a coffin. They didn't bring nails. You know who's in a coffin and it's nailed 80% of the way shut? It's the Texas Longhorns, man. Texas gets the win on Wednesday afternoon. They beat Vanderbilt. By the way, there's a conversation about Vanderbilt that we're going to have here in a second. But Texas gets the win. Texas finds a way to survive. Texas beats Vandy in the opening round of the SEC tournament. Listen, I'll be real. I still think Texas has a lot of work to do. Even with the win, we're talking about a team that is 18-14 overall. We're talking about a team that, listen, I understand that they played a ton of Q1 games between, the SEC. They also played, UConn at home. They played, whatever. They played Ohio State on a neutral. They played a ton of Q1 games. Doesn't change the fact that the problem with them is I just think the 14 losses is what sticks out, and 6-12 in SEC play. They had so many opportunities late. They lose at South Carolina. They get swept by Arkansas. They lose to Georgia. Listen, none of these losses individually are terrible, but you just lost too many games. So they're 18-14 now. They survive to face Texas A&M. You talk about an interesting matchup on Thursday at the SEC tournament. I still think even with a win over A&M, you're probably inching closer. I'm not sure you're there yet. Now, it'll be interesting because I do see Joe Lunardi has them as one of the first teams out. We will see if that changes. I think they got to keep winning because they're one. Even if they're on the right side of the bubble now, again, you're always risking that thing where what happens if, again, there's a surprise winner of the ACC, a surprise winner of the Mountain West, a surprise winner in the Big East. So Texas gets the win. I don't think they should feel too good yet, but they do get the victory. They survive another day. I think they got to beat Texas A&M to really feel like they're doing pretty good. By the way, we do have a final in Kansas City. The Kansas Jayhawks have beaten UCF in OT. So, by the way, that's good news if you're a bubble team because that is one less team you got to worry about. UCF is eliminated. Kansas advances to face Arizona in the second round of the Big 12 tournament. All right, let's keep it going. Let's stay in the SEC because another game that just went final that is huge for the bubble picture. The Oklahoma Sooners just beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, we'll talk about Georgia in a minute. I think Georgia is in. Oklahoma is hanging on by the skin of their teeth. And listen, I got to credit where it's due, man. What's crazy about the SEC is that every single time you think a team is just done, they find a way to get wins. We just talked about it with Texas, but Oklahoma is the same way. Remember, they had the last second loss to Kentucky, then a last second loss to Ole Miss. They then proceed to win their final 2 regular season games just to put them back on the bubble, beating Missouri and then winning at Texas to end the regular season. Well, they get the win over Georgia, and I think they're going to be an interesting team on Selection Sunday. Listen, I'm not always an advocate of these teams with all these losses getting into the NCAA tournament, but what's kind of crazy about them, they have some really good wins in the out-of-conference, as we've discussed. Beat Louisville on a neutral, beat Arizona on a neutral, beat Michigan on a neutral. And I know that those teams like Louisville and Arizona specifically were not as good then as they are now. Doesn't change the fact, in my opinion, the wins still count the same. And so for them, the thing that's holding them back, they do have a Q3 loss on their resume. I would assume, without looking too deep at their resume, I'm guessing that's maybe, I don't even know what that loss would be, to be perfectly honest. Maybe, they lost at home to LSU. Yeah, that'll do the trick. That's a Q3 loss there that could anchor things down. Oklahoma gets the win. But listen, 6-12 in the SEC, that is tough to overcome. They play Kentucky on Thursday in the final game at the SEC tournament. I think win and you're in, lose, I still think you got to feel pretty good about going to Dayton at the very least. By the way, remember, Oklahoma was one of the first 4 out last year. Imagine if it happened again. By the way, does anybody else remember when Seth Greenberg was a coach at Virginia Tech? And he was always like the first team out for like 6 straight years. And one time he started crying on TV. I'm just bringing it up because we're headed towards that way with Porter Moser. If they were in the first 4 out again this year, that'd be tough. But listen, they're 6-12 in the SEC, so I don't know what else there is to say. But they needed a win, I thought, tonight against Georgia. They get one. That is a big one. That will be a Q1 win when it's all said and done. Let's keep it going on the bubble winners from Wednesday. Let's switch gears. Let's go to the Big 12, okay? So the Big 12, the Baylor Bears. So Baylor, very interesting team. Listen, say what you want about Baylor. They really, 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 really challenged themselves in the out-of-conference, played at UConn. They played St. John's in Tennessee in back-to-back games in the Bahamas. They played Gonzaga on a neutral that was in Spokane. Problem is with them, 1, they have a Q3 loss. 2, 5-11 in quad 1. So the bottom line for Baylor, listen, they just could not afford a loss on Wednesday night. They survived. They beat Kansas State. By the way, Kansas State's season is over. I just saw a video of Coleman Hawkins crying in the locker room. I don't know what that's about. We'll monitor it. But 19-13 is where Baylor is right now. They've played a ton of Q1 games. I think they're probably on the right side of this thing, even if they were to lose the next game. I think if they were to beat Texas Tech on Thursday night, they're definitely in. I think even if they don't, I would assume at worst they're going to Dayton. They are just a team that has played so many big games. And they're almost like North Carolina, who we'll get into in a minute. I don't think we should be punishing teams that put together crazy non-conference schedules. They should be given the benefit of the doubt, but Baylor gets the win. By the way, they were also a team that beat Arkansas earlier in the year as well. So I just mentioned the North Carolina Tar Heels. They are next. Can we call it a huge win? I mean, Notre Dame's terrible. This ain't football. Marcus Freeman ain't walking through that door, okay? But at the same time, like, it's tough for me because North Carolina is a fascinating team. This is another one like Arkansas against South Carolina, like Baylor against Kansas State. If you lost this one, it was over. I do still think North Carolina has some work to do. Problem with their bracket, we talked about it in the ACC preview. Wake Forest on Thursday is just a Q2 game on a neutral. Wake Forest metrics aren't good. I can't explain everything that goes into the net. I just know that Wake Forest is not going to be a great win in the committee's eyes. And so it might come down to having to beat Duke in the quarterfinals, assuming that Duke gets there. Duke plays Georgia Tech on Thursday afternoon. Listen, I don't think it's fair. I've said I think North Carolina should be given the benefit of the doubt. They scheduled like crazy. I've used the stat of their 12 losses. 6 of them are to teams that could get number 1 seeds. 2 losses to Duke, 1 loss to Michigan State, 1 loss to Alabama, 1 loss to Auburn, 1 loss to Florida. I think if you leave them out, again, assuming nothing crazy happens, you're punishing a team for scheduling like crazy. If they had just stayed home from Maui and gotten 3 more wins against bad teams, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So I just bring it up. I do hope they get the benefit of the doubt, but you got to beat Wake Forest. There is zero doubt in my mind on that. Got to get that victory. We'll see what happens. Staying in the ACC really quick, another game that went final late Wednesday. The SMU Mustangs beat Syracuse. Final score 73-53. By the way, fun fact, Syracuse, this is the 16-year anniversary of the 6 overtime game, Syracuse versus UConn. I was at that game. Amazing how quickly Syracuse has fallen, or how far Syracuse has fallen. They were, I think, the 12-13 seed in this ACC tournament. For SMU, this was about, if you lose this game, your season's effectively over. You still have a lot of work to do. SMU will advance and play Clemson, I believe, in the next round, maybe Louisville. You got to win that game. They don't have a single Q1 win. I think even if you win that game, there's still more work to do. They are the epitome of a team that just needs everybody on the bubble to lose. They got to win games. No bid stealers. They have a ton of work to do. SMU right now is on the fringes of the bubble. To me, we'll see if they can get the victory. I think that's all for winners. Let me triple check here. Do we have any other winners? No, I think we're on to the losers. Know who's a loser? I'll tell you what, I don't know how big of a loser. Vanderbilt to me is kind of sort of interesting. Listen, I put them into the field, about 4 games ago. And, this is why people are always hesitant to say somebody is a lock, because when you say somebody's a lock, what that means is that they could literally lose every single game the rest of the year, and they are in the tournament field. So why do I bring it up? It is because we put Vandy in the field. We said they were a lock, and then they proceeded to lose their last 3 games, okay? So they lose to Arkansas at home. They lose to, Georgia on the road. Now they lose their opener to Texas in the SEC tournament. Right now, Vanderbilt is sitting overall on the season, I believe, at 20-12. Let me go ahead and double check that. They're sitting on the season, Vanderbilt at 20-12, 8-10 in the SEC. Listen, I'll be real. I think they've done enough, but this is not the way you want to go out. The one thing I'll say, listen, and we're going to talk about this in a minute with some of these other teams. The last 10 games used to be a metric that the committee used to kind of judge who was playing their best basketball. That is no longer the case. But I do think Vanderbilt losing their last 3 games, they have three Q2 losses, That's way more than most of the teams on the bubble. This feels like a team that's headed to Dayton to me. If I had to predict right now, I don't think Vandy's going to be out, but I would expect them to be in Dayton. We said all you got to do is win and you're in. Well, we thought they were in. They go 0-3 to end the regular season. I think there's going to be a little bit of a sweat till Selection Sunday. Speaking of losers, listen, I don't really know if they're a loser or not. They probably aren't, but it is at least worth mentioning Georgia. Georgia takes the loss to Oklahoma in a game that just went final. Listen, I've been critical of Mike White. This is not where I'm going to pile on Georgia. They won 4 straight to end the regular season. They beat Florida in a win that's going to be better than pretty much anybody has in college basketball all year. I think they're in. I do. But listen, again, like everybody else, you got to worry about bid stealers. You got to worry about teams that you don't expect to be in the NCAA tournament getting in. The good thing for Georgia, some really good wins. They beat St. John's in the out-of-conference. They beat Arkansas at Arkansas earlier in the year. As we mentioned, they beat Kentucky at home. So I think Georgia's in. To me, at the very least, they're on the fringes of the bubble. I think they're safe. You would have loved one more win, but they should be good. I think they're in the field. I don't think they're on the bubble, but it's at least worth mentioning in this segment. Really quickly, let's get to the rest of the losers outside of the SEC. Listen, you talk about the fringes of the bubble. Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is not good, was not good. Cincinnati gets blown out. They really didn't get blown out. They lost by 20. It was about a 10-point game for most of the second half. I was watching a big chunk of this. But Cincinnati was at best on the fringes of the bubble. They entered today at 18-14 overall. They did win their Big 12 tournament opener. But you look at Cincinnati, listen, bottom line is, we've talked about it. They basically played no one in the out-of-conference. 2-11 in quad 1. By the way, this is like when people are like, oh, Arkansas's not in. It's like Arkansas has 6 Q1 wins. Cincinnati's 2-11, okay? So Cincinnati, they're done. They're not going to the NCAA tournament. What'll be interesting is really 2 things. One, we have this Crown tournament, which is like the new NIT, and I think they're going to push for a team like Cincinnati. 2, Just putting it out there. Just keep your little eye on this. I think there's a possibility Wes Miller has coached his last game at Cincinnati. I believe this is year 4, no NCAA tournament bids. I'm just here to tell you there'd be some people that might be interested in that job if it opened. Mick Cronin might be running out of patience at UCLA. Could he go back to Cincinnati? By the way, you remember who Mick Cronin replaced? Andy Kennedy. Andy Kennedy might try to get that job as well. I think there's a possibility it was Wes Miller's last game. Staying in the Big 12, West Virginia is kind of an interesting one. I think West Virginia is probably in 19-13, 10-10, 10 wins in the Big 12. Some really good wins, by the way. At Kansas was one of them. You go through, they swept Cincinnati, a team that we just talked about, and really took care of business mostly on their home court. Other thing, too, it's worth noting, in the Bahamas, took care of business against Gonzaga and Arizona. They're probably in, but you would have liked to win one more game. And I think the big thing is you lose to Colorado. I believe, I could be wrong, I believe that's a Q3 loss. It's on a neutral. And why this is a bad loss. So it was interesting. I was listening to somebody break down UConn's, how high could UConn kind of get on the seed lines and stuff. And one of the things people said about UConn was that they have a Q3 loss to Colorado on a neutral that's kind of weighing it down. Remember, they lost to Colorado in the Bahamas. So if it's a bad loss for UConn and it's going to hurt their seeding, you would think it would hurt West Virginia as well. I think West Virginia is in. I haven't put pen to paper. They're going to sweat till Selection Sunday, but they're in. I think's officially out. The Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State's done. Cook them. They're done. Get ready for spring football. Ryan Day can do no wrong. Who cares? It's time to talk about the quarterback battle, baby. Listen, with Ohio State, also, actually, let me even backtrack on Ohio State. They lose to Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Iowa may have just cost the Big Ten 2 bids. Okay, by the way, I was texting a buddy of mine who coaches at a team on the bubble. And I said to him, you got to send a gift basket over to the Iowa Hawkeyes, because remember, they beat Nebraska on Sunday. That knocked Nebraska out of the Big Ten tournament, which of course knocked them off the bubble. And then after that, they beat Ohio State. Listen, I think Ohio State's done. Ohio State has a lot of good out-of-conference wins, but you are now talking about a Buckeyes team that with this loss is now 17-15 overall. I just don't know how you can put a 17-15 team into the NCAA tournament, even from a power conference, even with nice wins like Kentucky on a neutral, like Texas on a neutral. I just don't know how 17-15 can get the job done. I think they absolutely could not lose this game. I thought they had to win at least one more to feel safe, but they lose. They are out. I believe they are officially out of the tournament picture as well. I think that's it for the bubble. Here's the thing. A lot more bubble to get to tomorrow. So this is what's great about Champ Week. North Carolina still got to beat Wake Forest. Texas still has to beat Texas A&M. Some of these bubble teams in the Mountain West, the Colorado States, the Boise States, the San Diego State teams, they all start play on Thursday.